This ties into something that you mentioned in your piece that I haven't heard anyone else talking about, but I'll give the sentence as a cue. I don't think you'll need it, but founders running successful AI companies should all take a cold, hard look at exiting in the next 12 to 18 months, which might be a value maximizing moment for outcomes. And you sort of went back to the dot-com bust and the sort of survival rates and then breakout rates. Could you just explain that sentence?
Sure.
And then also explain how you're thinking about whether you think this will be winners take all, oligopoly, like what type of dynamic you think emerges?
In terms of the precedent, and that doesn't mean it's going to happen here, but if you look at every technology cycle, 90, 95, 99% of the companies in that cycle go bust.
Mm-hmm.
And that dates way back even to what was high tech 100 years ago, which was the automotive industry.
Mm-hmm.
In Detroit, dozens of car companies and hundreds of suppliers, and it collapsed into a small number of auto companies eventually. And so this is not a new story. During the internet cycle or bubble of the 90s, 450 companies went public in 99. 450 or so companies went public in the first few months of 2000. And so that was 900 companies, and say another 500 to 1,000 went public in the couple years before that. So you had somewhere between 1,500 and 2,000 companies go public. So that means they kind of made it.
Mm-hmm.
And of those, how many have survived? A dozen? Maybe 2 dozen?
Yeah.
And so out of 2,000 companies, 1,980 or so went under
Mm-hmm.
in one form or another, or maybe they got bought for a little bit. And so there's no reason to think the AI cycle will be any different. And every cycle is like that. SaaS was like that, and mobile was like that, and crypto was like that. So most companies are not going to make it. A handful will, and we can talk about those. And so if you're running an AI company right now, you should ask yourself, what is the nature of the durability of your company? And are you one of that dozen or two that are going to be really important 10 years from now? Or is now a good moment for you to sell because what you're doing will start to get commoditized, or will be competed by a lab, or will be something that the market will shift or the technology will shift and you'll become obsolete. And there's a handful of companies that will continue to be great. They should never sell. They should never exit. They should keep going. But there's probably a lot of companies that now or the next 12 to 18 months is the best moment for them possible in terms of the value that they'll get for what they're doing. And for every company, there's a value maximizing moment where they hit their peak. And it's usually a window. There's usually, 6, 12 months where what you're doing is important enough, you're scaling enough, everything's working before some headwind hits you.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it's very predictable that headwind is coming and you can see it. And often you see it in the second derivative of growth. Like how fast are you growing starts to plateau a little bit, and you're either going to keep going up or you should sell.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's really what that's meant to be. I'm incredibly bullish around AI, as you can tell from the rest of the conversation. And so it's lots about the transformation that's happening overall because of the technology, and more that only a handful of companies are going to continue to be really important. And so are you one of them or not? If you're one of them, you should never, ever, ever sell.
So what are the characteristics of that handful, the handful that have durable advantage? Because you look back at 2000, it's like, man, what would you have used to try to pick out Google and Amazon?
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that's the best comparator, but within the many just avalanche of AI companies,
Mm-hmm.
which are those that you think have durable advantage? I mean, of course, some of the name brand labs come to mind. Maybe they become the interface for everything else. Who knows? But how would you answer that in terms of either shared characteristics or actual names? What sets apart the handful that you think will make it?
I think the core labs will be around for a while. So that's OpenAI, Anthropic, Google, barring some accident or disaster or some blow up. But it seems like they're in a really durable spot. And to your point on like market structure, I wrote a Substack post, 3 years ago or something, predicting that would probably be an oligopoly market and there'd be a handful and be aligned with the cloud. So that's roughly kind of what happened. I mean, there's Meta and there's XAI and there's other players that may change this. It didn't exist when I wrote that post. But it feels to me like in the short run, that's an oligopoly. Like there's no reason for that to be a monopoly market unless one of them pulls ahead so much in capabilities that it just becomes the default for everyone. And that could happen, but so far it hasn't. And again, this compute constraint may prevent that in the short run, or at least provide an asymptote on it. As you move up the stack and you see, well, there's different application companies, there's Harvey for legal, there's a Bridge for health, there's Decagon and Sierra for customer success. There's these different companies per application. There's 3 or 4 lenses that you can look at. One is if the underlying model gets better, does your product or service get dramatically better for your customers in a way that they still want to keep using you? Second, how deep and broad are you going from a product perspective? Are you building out multiple products? Are they all integrated in a cohesive whole? Is it really being built directly into the processes in a company in a way that it's hard to pull out? Often the issue for companies in adoption of AI isn't how good is the AI, it's how much do I have to change the workflows and the ways that my people do things in order to adopt it. It's about change management usually, it's not about technology. And so if you've been able to embed yourself enough into workflows and how people do business and how they work and how everything else kind of ties together, that tends to be quite durable.
Mm-hmm.
Are you capturing and storing and using proprietary data? Sometimes it's useful. I think data moats in general are overstated, but I think sometimes it can be actually quite useful. And that's usually the system of record view of the world. So, there's a handful of criteria around like, will this thing be long-term defensible or not? And the application level, that's often one potential lens on it.
Mm-hmm. So question, if people are listening to this and they are in the position of perhaps a founder who should consider identifying their kind of short period of maximum valuation and perhaps hitting the parachute in some way, what are the options? Because I think of some of these companies, I'm not going to name them, but there are multiple companies that have multi-billion-dollar valuations.
Mm-hmm.
There seems to be, again, from a mostly layperson perspective, i.e. me, that the labs probably can build what they are currently selling without too much trouble. Do they aim to be acquired by a lab? In which case there's sort of a build versus buy decision for the lab itself. Are they aiming for one of not the OpenAIs or Anthropics, but maybe somebody who's trying to get more skin in the game, like Amazon or fill in the blank? What are the exit options?
I think there's a lot of exit options. And the thing that's crazy right now is if you go back 10 or 15 years, the biggest market cap in the world was like 300 billion.
Mm-hmm.
The biggest tech market cap was, 200-ish or something. I think the biggest one at the time was Exxon or somebody, like 15 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And over the last 10 or 15 years, what happens is we suddenly ended up with these multi-trillion-dollar market caps, which everybody thought was nuts at the time, but things will probably only get bigger. There'll probably be more aggregation versus less into the biggest winners. And there's more and more companies who have these market caps between, say, 100 billion and a few trillion in a way that's just unprecedented. And that means there's enormous buying power because 1% of 3 trillion is 30 billion, right? So you can dilute 1% and pay $30 billion for something, which is insane, right? That's really unprecedented. And that means that these really big acquisitions can happen.
For the companies that I'm imagining, again, I don't want to name names, that seem to have a limited lifespan, right? When I'm in these small group threads with friends of mine who are oftentimes, not always, but I'm in a bunch of them. And when they're tech investors, very successful tech investors. And I'm like, okay, these 5 companies, you've got 10 ships. How would you allocate your 10 ships? There's certain companies that consistently get 0, even though they're reasonably well known. Why would one of the labs buy one of those?
Depends on what it is. And it may be a lab. It may be one of the big tech incumbents, an Apple, Amazon,
right?
Google's kind of both things. There's Oracle, there's Samsung, there's Tesla, there's SpaceX now in the market doing things. There's a bunch of different buyers of different types. There's Snowflake and Databricks. There's Stripe, Coinbase if you're doing financial services. There's just a ton of companies that actually are quite large. That's kind of the point. And so often you end up selling to one of 4 things. You can sell to one of the big labs or hyperscalers or giant tech companies. You can sell to somebody who cares a lot about your vertical. So for example, a Thomson Reuters if you're doing legal or accounting or things that are kind of related to that. I mean, I think actually one thing that doesn't happen enough is merger of competitors, particularly private companies where you can do that. Because ultimately, if your primary vector is winning and you're neck and neck with somebody and you're competing on every deal and you're destroying pricing for each other, like maybe it's better to just merge. That actually was X.com and PayPal in the 90s, right? Yeah. Elon Musk, Peter Thiel were running different companies and they merged because they said, we're the 2 people doing this, why fight?
Yeah, or Uber, Lyft way back in the day, right? That might not have been a merger, it might have been an acquisition, but it's like...
Yeah, and the rumor is that almost happened and then, the Uber side walked away from it. But all the money that Uber spent on fighting Lyft for all those years maybe would have been better spent just buying them. Maybe not. I don't know the exact math on it. But often it actually does make sense to say, you know what, like we'll just stop fighting it out and we'll just combine and just go win. Because if the primary purpose is to win the market, you're already fighting all these big incumbents that already exist anyhow. So why make it even harder?